On March 12, 2026, Benjamin Netanyahu held his first press conference since the war with Iran began. While he was claiming Israel is a global superpower, air raid sirens went off across central Israel. As he was still speaking, Israel's military confirmed it had detected a new barrage of missiles launched from Iran, the sixth salvo of the day. He could not hide from it. 13 days into this war, with more than 6,000 targets struck and over $11 billion spent in the first week alone, Iran is still firing ballistic missiles at Israel. Netanyahu tried to project strength. He talked about crushing the regime. He talked about eliminating Iran's leadership. But buried in that press conference was an admission that contradicts everything Israel and America have been saying since the bombs started falling. And once you hear it, the rest of this war looks completely different. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what Netanyahu admitted, why U.S. intelligence directly contradicts his biggest claim, and where this conflict is heading next. Remember what the public was told in the first week. The IDF said it had destroyed 300 Iranian missile launchers. Reports cited a 70% drop in Iranian fire toward Israel. Officials claimed roughly 3/4 of Iran's launch capability had been wiped out. The message from both America and Israel was clear. Overwhelming force, mission nearly accomplished, Iran on its knees. Now listen to what Netanyahu said 13 days in. He told reporters that Iran had been burying its missile and nuclear capabilities deep underground. He said that if they had not acted when they did, within months, those weapons would have become immune to any attack. That word, immune. That is not a leader describing an enemy he has already beaten. That is a leader explaining why the enemy is still shooting back. He is telling you the campaign has limits. He is telling you there are assets the coalition cannot reach. A journalist reporting from Ramallah flagged it in real time, calling it a stark contrast to what officials had been claiming since the opening strikes. Quick, before we continue, thanks a lot for tuning in. Your support is what keeps this show going, and I appreciate you watching. As always, please make sure you're subscribed and like the video so more people get to see this. Now, on that same day, March 12th, 6 separate ballistic missile salvos came in from Iran. Hezbollah simultaneously launched over 200 rockets from Lebanon at central Israel in what the IDF described as a coordinated joint operation. A missile struck a home in Haniel. A rocket hit a house in Beit Nekofa, injuring civilians. Schools across the entire country remain shut. Israel is still operating under a national state of emergency. 2 weeks into a war that was supposed to be swift and decisive, Netanyahu himself told Fox News on day 4 that this would be a quick and decisive action. It has been neither. The deadliest single event of this conflict landed days earlier in Beit Shemesh, roughly 18 miles from Jerusalem. An Iranian ballistic missile hit a communal shelter inside a synagogue. 9 civilians were killed, dozens more were wounded. 2 Israeli interceptors were fired at that incoming warhead. Both missed. And here is the part that should concern every defense planner watching. The sirens in the area did not activate in time to give residents the standard 90-second warning window. Iran's ballistic missiles can reach Israel in roughly 10 minutes from launch. The entire civil protection model depends on early detection, timely alerts, and functional intercepts. At Beit Shemesh, all 3 failed simultaneously. That is not a marginal glitch. That is a structural exposure in the very architecture Israel has built its survival doctrine around. When the interceptors miss and the sirens lag, the shelter is not protection. It is a trap. Stay with me, because what Netanyahu said next about regime change contradicts what American intelligence has been telling the White House for weeks. And that gap is the most dangerous fault line in this entire war right now. Netanyahu told reporters that one of his core objectives is to create the conditions for the Iranian people to expel their brutal regime. Then a journalist asked him directly whether he could guarantee that outcome. And he said it. He said he cannot promise 100% that the regime will fall without the Iranian people themselves rising up. He told Iranians, help is on the way, but at the end of the day, it is up to you. Think about what that means from a wartime leader in the middle of an active campaign. It is an admission that the military operation by itself cannot deliver the stated political goal. The U.S. called this operation Epic Fury. Israel called it Operation Roaring Lion. The opening salvo on February 28th killed Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in a targeted strike on a compound in Tehran. Billions spent, thousands of sorties, the Supreme Leader dead, and the man directing the strikes says the outcome still depends on Iranian civilians taking to the streets. Now hold that against what U.S. intelligence has assessed. A classified report by the National Intelligence Council, completed before the first bomb even dropped, concluded that neither limited airstrikes nor a prolonged military campaign would be likely to result in regime change in Iran. That assessment was written in February 2026. The National Intelligence Council is not a fringe body. It represents the consensus view of all major American intelligence agencies. Since that initial assessment, multiple follow-up reports have reached the same conclusion. Sources described a multitude of intelligence analyses, all providing consistent findings that the regime is not in danger and retains control of the Iranian public. The most recent of these was completed just days before Netanyahu held his press conference. Even a senior Israeli official privately acknowledged to Reuters that there is no certainty the war will lead to the collapse of the clerical government. And here is what makes this worse. Iran did not descend into chaos after Khamenei was killed and consolidated. The Assembly of Experts convened within days and selected Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead leader's son, as the new supreme leader. He is described by multiple analysts as more hardline than his father. His first statement as supreme leader was read aloud on Iranian state television. He did not appear on camera. That raises obvious questions about where he is and how secure he feels physically, but the substance of the statement was defiant. He vowed to avenge Iranian blood and explicitly declared that the Strait of Hormuz would remain a tool of pressure against the West. The regime did not fracture. It promoted from within. It issued commands. It kept launching. When a journalist asked Netanyahu what fate awaited Mohaddeh and Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem, his answer was a public assassination threat delivered casually. He said if he were an insurance agent, he would not write either man a life insurance policy. That line dominated the headlines. But step back and ask what it actually reveals. 13 days into the most expensive military campaign since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the leader running it is still issuing personal threats against the two figures whose removal was supposedly the entire point. They are alive, the regime is intact, the command structure is functioning, and the missiles keep arriving. We will come back to the financial toll of this conflict shortly. But first, there's another front that deserves attention, because Netanyahu got confronted with something he said 2 years ago, and his response revealed a problem Israel does not want to talk about openly. A reporter reminded him that in 2024, he told the Israeli public that military strikes had set Hezbollah back 20 years. The reporter then asked the obvious question, if that was true, how is Hezbollah currently firing 200 rockets a day into Israel? Netanyahu did not answer directly. He reframed. He said the original threat projections were catastrophic. Towers falling in Tel Aviv, 20,000 Israelis dead, cities leveled. None of that happened, he argued, because Israel struck Hezbollah aggressively. But then he said something that undercuts his entire position. He admitted on the record that Hezbollah continues to be capable of attacking us. That is a sitting prime minister conceding that a force he publicly declared neutralized 2 years ago is conducting sustained offensive operations against his country right now. The ground reality backs that up completely. On March 12th, the IDF carried out rare strikes on Hezbollah positions in central Beirut outside the traditional Dahieh stronghold. That is a meaningful escalation in targeting scope. Israeli ground forces pushed further into southern Lebanon, targeting Radwan force installations. Defense Minister Israel Katz warned the Lebanese government that Israel is prepared to widen ground operations and ordered civilians south of the Zahrani River to evacuate. Senior Israeli defense officials warned privately that Hezbollah still holds a large inventory of launchers and intends to grind the IDF down over time. Israel is now locked in a two-front war with no clear endpoint for either theater. Now, here is the number that ties everything together. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed for nearly 2 weeks. The IRGC declared that not a single liter of oil would pass through and threatened to set ablaze any vessel that attempts the crossing. Since February 28th, at least 16 separate attacks on commercial ships have been documented in and around the strait. 8 seafarers are dead. 1 is missing. Roughly 150 vessels are stranded. Iran has planted about a dozen naval mines in the waterway. The U.S. military confirmed it attacked 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels near the strait after Trump warned Tehran against placing mines. But the mines are already there. Brent crude shot from approximately $73 per barrel before the war to over $113 within the first 10 days. American gasoline prices have climbed 17% since the conflict began. The International Energy Agency responded by announcing that its 32 member nations would collectively release 400 million barrels from emergency oil reserves, the largest coordinated drawdown in the IEA's history. Saudi Arabia started rerouting its maritime trade to Red Sea ports to bypass the strait entirely. And the IRGC's public message to the world was blunt: expect oil at $200 a barrel. And this war is costing far more than oil. The Pentagon confirmed to the Senate Armed Services Committee that the first 6 days of operations alone ran over $11.3 billion. That makes this the most expensive American military engagement since the opening phase of the Iraq invasion. More than 130 cities across Iran have been hit. And the costs are not just American. Iran struck Gulf states indiscriminately. Saudi Arabia intercepted 12 drones on March 12th alone. The UAE stopped 10 missiles and 26 drones the same day. Qatar had to shut down liquefied natural gas production at its two largest facilities after Iranian strikes hit the installations directly. European natural gas futures jumped roughly 30% after Qatar went offline because Qatar supplies a major share of Europe's LNG imports. The U.S. Embassy compound in Kuwait was struck. British forces at a base in Erbil, Iraq, came under fire. At least 7 American service members have been killed across the region. Iran has launched retaliatory strikes on at least 27 different locations hosting U.S. military personnel. A later FBI bulletin warned California law enforcement about a possible Iranian drone retaliation scenario, but Reuters reported it was based on a single unverified tip, and the White House said no such threat to the U.S. homeland existed. The civilian toll inside Iran is devastating and growing. The Iranian Red Crescent reported nearly 800 killed. Human rights organizations say the actual number exceeds 2,400. Iran's deputy health minister stated that 31 major hospitals have been damaged and 12 are completely non-functional. A girls' school in the southern city of Marvadasht was struck during the campaign. Reuters reported that investigators believed U.S. forces were likely responsible, that the Pentagon says the case remains under investigation, and the two sources said outdated targeting data may have been to blame. In Lebanon, 687 people have been killed since Israel expanded its campaign, 98 of them children. And through all of this destruction, the political payoff Netanyahu expected from the war has not arrived. A poll released while he was still on that Zoom call showed him losing seats in projected election outcomes. He launched this conflict partly as a political calculation ahead of Israeli elections that could come as early as June or July. Al Jazeera's correspondent in Ramallah reported that Netanyahu anticipated the war would consolidate public support and position him for another term. That is not materializing. His corruption trial continues. Israel's Pardons Department completed a formal review of his pardon request and found it does not meet the legal criteria. And the man he is counting on, Donald Trump, publicly called Israeli President Isaac Herzog weak, pathetic, and a disgrace for not issuing that pardon. Netanyahu refused to push back against Trump on camera. He said the president can say whatever he wants. He described their relationship as 100-fold stronger than anything between previous leaders. They speak daily, he claimed openly. But Trump has also told reporters he wants this war finished soon. He said the question now is just when do we stop? Netanyahu needs the conflict to extend long enough to avoid the courtroom and reach election day from a position of strength. Their strategic clocks are running in opposite directions. And the longer this gap widens, the harder it becomes to define what victory even means for either of them. Share this with anyone following this war right now. Iran is still launching ballistic missiles at Israel 13 days into the campaign. Netanyahu admitted he cannot guarantee regime change. U.S. intelligence says the regime is not in danger. Mojtaba Khamenei is issuing orders from hiding. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Oil cracked to $100. The IEA released 400 million barrels from reserves. Hezbollah is firing 200 rockets a day from Lebanon. 7 Americans are dead across the region. The war has cost over $11 billion in under a week. And the prime minister steering this entire operation held his first press conference on a Zoom call, while incoming fire sent his own population underground. The stated objective was the fall of the Iranian government. 13 days in, the government is still standing. The missiles are still flying. And no one on any side has been able to define what a realistic ending actually looks like. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Who do you think is winning the war? Do you think the war is getting out of hand? Let me know. And please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated. and click the video on the screen to see another.